Navigating the Digital Jungle with Sue Atkins and friends.
Hello, welcome to Navigating the Digital Jungle with me, Sue Atkins, parenting author and broadcaster, and I'm delighted to be here today with my friends Angeline Corvalia, creator of Data Girl and Friends, empowering young minds with online safety and AI literacy videos, games and educational materials, and Tara Jones, an experienced deputy head and EdTech consultant who works with families and schools around all the tools and interventions for a healthier, more purposeful phone use. So, we're here today, as usual, to guide you through the digital jungle. And the topic of the week this week is toddlers and tech, navigating that digital playground. And we're going to be diving in and looking at screen time management for young children, benefits and drawbacks of screen time for toddlers, tips for parents on setting screen time limits, recommended apps and educational content for very young children, and why handing over a device to a toddler to preempt a tantrum could be the worst thing you could do. So as I say, today's episode is all about early tech exposure for toddlers. What can its benefits be? But of course, as we know, it does come with several potential downsides. Now, I was talking on LBC this week to Ben Kentish about the news that the Scouts waiting list tops 100,000 as parents are trying to help lockdown children develop self-esteem and social skills. And demand for joining the Scouts membership has so skyrocketed that the organisation is urging more volunteers to sign up to become Scout leaders. Now, we all know the pandemic significantly impacted toddlers, affecting their development in several ways. The prolonged periods of lockdown and social distancing, remember that? Yeah, that really did limit some children's opportunities for social interaction, which of course is crucial for developing communication and social skills. And that's why I started to volunteer at my local library doing rhyme time for babies and toddlers, where I was singing and playing the guitar to help young children develop a love of communication and vocabulary and socialisation. All those things that some toddlers, not all, missed out on. But play is the way, as I've said before and will say again. It's a really vital tool in lessening the developmental setbacks caused by the pandemic for toddlers, and through play and engaged activities, we can really help them come back from that. Don't panic if your child was growing up during those pandemic years. Their social skills and communication can be encouraged and developed. They can learn all these wonderful things through play. I could go on, but play matters. It's important, I think, for kids to move away from that smartphone-based childhood into a more play-based childhood. And I want to help stave off that trend, and that's why I do the podcast. Now, on another note, I was reading a very fascinating article in the Irish Independent this week about a study that found children given digital devices just before they're having their tantrums don't learn to self-regulate their emotions. So, we all know that embarrassing moment. You say, oh my God, they're going to go off on one. But handing a mobile phone or a tablet just as they're going to throw a tantrum can be damaging to them because they're not learning to self-regulate. Now, what do I mean by self-regulate? Well, self-regulation means that children can calm their own emotions over time. They learn to manage their anger. They learn all sorts of things around handling social situations. It's like having an internal set of controls that help the child manage their emotions, control their behaviour, and focus and concentrate. And there's loads of research to show that children with self-regulation are able to get along with other kids better, and they have fewer conflicts, and they do better at school because they can concentrate and self-regulate themselves if they feel a bit overwhelmed with something. And of course, they experience fewer mood swings and they're generally more happy and healthy. So there's loads more that will be in the show notes around this topic and loads more in the bonus content because I'm very passionate about writing about self-regulation. But I just want to ask Tara, so what are some of the concerns around toddlers and tech generally? Let's kick off with that.
Well, I think the biggest concern for any parent, particularly young children, if you think new mum, what you're going to ask her about, you're probably going to talk to her about sleep. And this comes up time and time again. It's that big concern around sleep and making sure our children are having quality sleep. And a major concern is that excessive screen time can interfere with sleep. We know that as adults, don't we? Of course we do. But it's that blue light. It's emitted by screens. It can disrupt the production of melatonin, and that's the hormone that regulates our sleep. So it's going to lead to difficulties then in falling asleep. And that in turn is poor quality sleep. So crucial for toddler development. You might think if they stay up late, they'll sleep in the next day. Never happens. That doesn't work. My lovely Irish mum has always said to me, sleep breeds sleep. If your children are getting good sleep, then they're going to sleep better. And poor sleep can affect mood, behaviour, sort of the overall well-being of your toddler. So I think that sleep really does need to be a concern, and that's why most advice and most research out there will certainly talk about those crucial hours before bedtime, ensuring that that's a very relaxed, calm, that's your time for your stories. Really, we don't want any of that blue light anywhere near our young children during that time. And of course, too much screen time, that's going to lead to decreased physical activity, also essential for their growth and for their health. So it's not rocket science, that part. How can we make sure our kids are getting a really great night's sleep?
Let's look at social skills, Angeline. What are some of the impacts on toddlers' social skills and tech?
Well, toddlers learn social skills mainly by interacting with the people around them. They observe and imitate adults and peers. And through play, what you've said quite often, they learn about sharing, negotiation, empathy. Interactions with parents and peers are an important part of learning social skills. It helps them learn the social norms, communication, emotional intelligence. It also shapes our behavior and understanding of diverse perspective. So interacting is everything.
Wow, quite a lot. It is, isn't it?
I am a parent of a child who was very recently a toddler, so I'm very aware of the fact that we're all exhausted and it feels like a screen or your sanity. I get it. I've been there.
Yeah.
It's just important to remember that when toddlers spend too much time with screens, they miss out on these opportunities to develop crucial social skills. They simply can't learn nearly enough through a screen or a device compared to the interpersonal interactions. And there's a risk that they'll miss out.
Yeah, it's a passive thing. If a child's sitting there for ages, that's lovely. They're nice and quiet and get on and eat, do the hoovering or, whatever I'm doing. But actually, it's very passive. They're not interacting. They're not learning social skills or, negotiations or just being engaged in real life.
Yeah.
So there's so much, isn't there, going on with it?
Well, passive is important. I'm glad you said that because as we've said a few times, Tara says it quite often, that you can active screen time. Like my parents are in the United States. I'm in Europe. My daughter spends a lot of time on screens talking with her grandparents across the Atlantic. So that's not passive screen time. It's different. So that is a very, very important thing to think about, whether it's passive or active.
The American Pediatric Society actually says, high quality content, but for children younger than 18 months, avoid the use of screen media other than, like you've said, video chatting. It's fantastic for connecting across the ponds, isn't it? It's amazing. But they've got to be age 2 to 5, the recommendations, and there are sometimes recommendations for a reason. I know we've talked about research, but they suggest that limit screen time to just 1 hour per day for high quality programs with toddlers aged 2 to 5 and watch it with them, because then you can interact and talk and ask a question or laugh with them. So it's not passive, it's a bit more interactive. So the show notes will have all of those recommendations and guidelines for you. I won't sit here and read them all out now. But ensuring toddlers have plenty of time for unstructured play is the antidote, in my opinion, to these passive problems. So let's discuss language development. How can excessive screen time impact a toddler's language skills, Tara?
Really good question. And I think as educators, we're starting to see, we are seeing the impact post-COVID and our young people, how their language has been developing as they're starting school. And there is lots of research in this space that shows that toddlers who have spent a lot of time in front of screens, they tend to have delayed language development. And this is because interactive conversations with parents and with caregivers, they're much more effective in promoting language skills than passively watching a screen. And that word passively is really important. We talk about it a lot. I think we'll dive back into this later in the conversation. But it's that engaging in back and forth dialogue where the child's encouraged to respond, to express themselves, to try out that new language. That's so crucial for the language acquisition.
And then there's attention and concentration issues, isn't there, Angeline? I mean, another concern is the potential impact on concentration. Like I say, how does early tech exposure affect these abilities?
Well, I'd like to start out with something that's quite important to me that I've noticed ever since my daughter was very young, that in our society, a lot of the content that is aimed at young age groups is actually too much for their developing brains.
Right.
And they can actually become overstimulated by it.
Right.
Toddlers' brains are highly sensitive to external stimuli. So exposure to like excessive, fast-paced, visually intense media like flashy cartoons and loud sounds can actually overwhelm them. Even if it's written there that it's okay for their age group, it's simply overwhelming for them. And it's important as parents to be aware of that. And during early childhood, the brain undergoes rapid development and forms these neural connections. Obviously not an expert on this.
No, but it's a really important point, this is. Really brilliant. Carry on.
Overstimulation can actually disrupt this process, and that can affect the attention and emotional regulation and cognitive abilities. So that's kind of why it's important to be aware of this. Toddlers who are frequently exposed to fast-paced, highly stimulating screen content, they might develop shorter attention spans. They can become accustomed to this constant stimulation and find it challenging to engage in activities that require sustained attention, such as listening to a story or playing with a single toy over some period. And it can make it harder for them to focus on tasks as they grow older.
You know, it makes it harder for them, actually. Sorry to interrupt you, but at school, because I'm obviously a former reception class teacher and deputy head and all of that. And there they all were. They're coming into school. They're not able to sit still to listen to the story on the carpet because they've been fast paced. And a lot of parents I work with say, they come to me and say, oh, he's hyperactive. Well, actually, they're overstimulated. And a child that's overtired can't actually get ready for bed because they're just hyped up. And it's because of sometimes too much screen time or too much energy that's been given to them because it gets faster, louder, more colourful. So I think your point is really an important one for parents to think about if they hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah, I mean, it's also important, obviously, child to child. I had a child who had sowieso challenge with attention and concentration, and she didn't have excessive screen time. So she just had that challenge. And as a parent, it's so hard when you see all the other, it seems like every other child is able to concentrate and be quiet except for yours.
Oh, it's an angel.
It's not true, though.
Every other child's
an
angel.
And it passes. This time passes if you put that extra effort in, which is really not easy, to help them regulate and kind of get through that period where the screen is the easiest solution. But yeah, just to be aware of the fact that there are these long-term consequences to taking the easy way excessively when the child is young.
I wrote an article quite a few years ago, actually, about delayed gratification because kids these days are not used to waiting. So in France, I read, and I thought, this is interesting. They bake in the morning, right, with their young kids and all the rest of it. And then they make them wait until the afternoon before they eat the cakes. Now, it may sound like, oh, my God, I couldn't possibly do that. But the point is they are delaying and looking forward to something. Sometimes if we have instant gratification all the time, you're never used to that real pleasure. It's a bit like when my daughter was saving up to buy a camera, this is back a while ago now, and my car was never so clean because, you know, she was doing all sorts of jobs and she was delaying that, waiting to get her own camera. She was saving up for it, and there was that delayed gratification to getting it. And so, of course, when she got it, she was thrilled with it and she really looked after it. So all of these things start when they're young. And if you haven't thought about that, I hope you find that as a useful tip from us today. Let's talk about the risk of exposure to inappropriate content. Now, even with parental controls, it's not always possible to completely shield toddlers from content that isn't suitable for their age. Now, I've written an article recently on my own blog around the differences if you've got children of different ages, how you balance if you've got a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old with a toddler who's 3 or, 2, because they're going to be watching and learning and all that sibling rivalry stuff, because they watch and learn from everybody. But not just that, it's also about what if they inadvertently, get exposed to violent or scary imagery, inappropriate language, or even the advertising content that isn't age appropriate, because that can be very confusing and frightening for toddlers, which affects their sense of security and well-being. Tara, what do you think parents need to do about that side of things?
I think this is where, well, actually using the word, it's the where and when that's really important. And I'll turn to some research here, actually, from Jacqueline Nesi. She's an assistant professor at Brown University, studying the impact of digital technology on kids' development and mental health. And I was really interested in one of her newsletters that I read recently. And it was talking about this difference between, where kids are consuming content, iPad versus TV, for perhaps. And a parent had been in touch, and the parent sort of explained, if my kid's watching TV, I think Bluey was the reference in this article. And when they watched Bluey on the tablet, the child was getting right up close, nose to screen, sometimes being hidden, under a blanket, going into their own little world. So that's the where, isn't it? Thinking about, well, where are they watching? Versus the TV, and the parent explains, if they've got the TV on in the lounge, in a bigger space, there might be some gymnastics on the sofa, that sort of rolling around, distracted, picking up some blocks from the floor, maybe in and out of conversation with people nearby. And I've talked about this before. I think if you have a shared space, so you know exactly what your child is watching and what they're doing, that's going to be really important to that monitoring from a parent's perspective. But also we've got that physical aspect. And I did speak to a physio about this, and we discussed unintentional perhaps, but that more active viewing in a bigger space with a TV, and versus we've all seen sort of pictures of our own children right up close or hidden. There's something about the handheld device that naturally for children, they're going to feel it's theirs and it can be hidden. And of course, then it is easy to monitor what they're up to, even with some restrictions. Now, in this piece of research, Jacqueline outlined a few findings. And I also think that these are really key. And I see this with schools, children I'm working with and parents I'm talking to. So some families will say that ending screen time is easier on a TV because you can sort of press off and physically leave it behind. This can sometimes be more challenging on an iPad. So an advice would be to designate a location in your house, if you do have an iPad, where that iPad lives, where it will be turned off, returns at the end of screen time. And you're going to have to be consistent here, really consistent in your approach. The content on an iPad, let's bear in mind, manipulative by design. It's persuasive technology that we're putting in our children's hands. And an iPad's more likely to have features like autoplay, AI, we're going to get into those suggested and related videos, rewards. If you watch the same program on an iPad, likely there might be like a rainbow that pops up or some stars at the end of that episode. There might be some gamification element. So, a tablet can be used. I think the parent was talking about Bluey. You could watch an episode of Bluey, no problem, on a tablet. But the exact show that the child's chosen, that's harder to monitor. So I think the TV element there and the shared space is important. And that leads also to co-viewing. So again, I want you to think visually of your child hidden away under a blanket in the corner with an iPad versus an open space and the television, because we definitely know the research shows about the benefits of co-viewing, actively engaging, easier on a TV, where you can have conversations. We were talking about language acquisition. You can talk about, well, what did that word mean? Oh, I wonder what happen there? You can bring in a conversation and try to kind of stay away from that secluded, isolated consumption of content. Most likely that's where inappropriate content is going to somehow, despite best efforts, filter through.
Angeline, what are your thoughts then on toddlers and tech and safety and AI? How does all that feed in together for young children?
The more the child spends on screens, on devices, the more data is available on them and the more personalized the content can be.
Gosh.
And I think we'll talk about it later, but some apps that are made to keep even the toddlers there. So there's really something to be aware of, that if it's online, it's collecting your child's data, and the more data it has, the better it will know your child, and also share with others. Just something to be aware of. But another thing I wanted to share is toddlers and tech. Before my daughter was born, my best friend warned me that most people use more tech than the child can handle. So from the very beginning, I really tried to limit as much as possible. And in the first years, I didn't manage nearly as much as I wanted to. It actually set kind of a mindset between both of us, my daughter and I, that slowly over time, and my husband over time, that what we didn't manage to have when we just cut it down over time. And so that's another thing I wanted to say, that it's not about being perfect at the moment. It's about, just to be, if you're aware of the risks, as we often say, you can slowly, have as little as possible, keeping sane, because you need to be sane. Your child needs,
screens or sanity.
They're going to suffer if you're not sane. So
Yeah, it's all about balance and incrementally. I talk a lot about that incremental stuff. If you're going to go and run a marathon, you don't just put on your tracksuit and run. You train for it incrementally. So it's the other way around with tech. Incrementally come off it if you find you think you're using it too much as a family or with your kids. And of course it's brilliant for those moments when I think my kids used to have screen time, because they're a bit older than everyone else's, because I'm so old now. But my kids used to come in when I was a deputy head and sit down and think, God, I need a cup of tea. So I'd sit down, have the cup of tea, and that was their screen time when they could sit after school and watch it. And of course it was fantastic for that. And then we all come together and we ate together and all the rest of it. Balance is what it's all about. Now, I tell you what I want to do today. I want to really emphasize the importance of play and launch my summer screen-free change. Challenges always sound a bit hard going to me. And the summer, there's all sorts of people doing all sorts of things around challenges to read, challenges to go to the library. I want it to be a summer screen-free change. It's just that attitude. Mindset is so important. So school's going to be out. Let's go screen free. So I want you to turn off and tune in a bit more. Use the summer holidays to reset your family's screen time habits. So embrace the sunny season. If it is sunny today, actually, here in the UK, for a change. So embrace the sunny season with these simple steps. Designate daily outdoor time. Make nature your playground. As a concept, just go out for half an hour or send the kids out to play for half an hour. Remove screens from bedrooms. Create a tech-free sanctuary from the bedroom. Engage in developmentally rich activities, and what I mean by that, encourage playing outside, physical activity, unstructured play, and time with friends. All pretty simple, to be honest. Encourage independent play. Let your kids solve their own boredom sometimes and spark their own creativity. That's how I grew up, sparking away outside on my own sometimes, because I think it helps them if they can learn to solve their own boredom, depending on their age, of course. And then cultivate creativity. Dive into arts and crafts, storytelling, or imaginative play. So whatever it is, a few ideas to rediscover the joys of a screen-free summer. Send us in your pictures, your ideas, your thoughts, how it works in your family to info@navigatingthedigitalJungle.com. Today's episode of Navigating the Digital Jungle is brought to you in collaboration with World Digital Detox Day, an international movement dedicated to reclaiming our lives from the overwhelming grip of technology. So, are you feeling overwhelmed by screens and technology? Take a break and join millions of people around the world on World Digital Detox Day, because it's the perfect opportunity to unplug, unwind and reconnect with the world around you for your mental health and your family and children's well-being. Join this important movement with over 7.5 million people worldwide and visit worlddigitaldetoxday.com to learn more about becoming involved with the world's largest digital well-being initiative. Start your digital detox journey today to better mental health and well-being for your whole family. So my guest today, I'm delighted to say, is Dr. Amanda Gummer. Amanda has over 20 years' experience working with children and families, widely considered as the go-to expert on play, toys and child development. She's the founder and CEO of the Good Play Guide and Fundamentally Children. Now, Amanda combines her theoretical knowledge with a really refreshing practical approach to family life, which resonates both with parents and professionals. Her book, Play, was published in May 2015 and has already been translated into 2 different languages. It's a really practical guide for parents to support their child's development through playful activities during the first critical 5 years of life. And Amanda, as you probably know, is regularly in the media and continues to take a very active role in research. And she's often involved in government policy around children's issues. And she's a member of the 2 all-party parliamentary groups. And Amanda ran the research consultancy Fundamentals for 10 years before combining it with the Good Toy Guide and the Good App Guide to Fundamentally Children. So she's the UK's leading source expert, independent advice on child development. So welcome today after that huge introduction.
I know, thank you for that.
Well, people need to know, and you're probably too modest to say. So let's kick off. I'm very keen to get chatting about you because the campaign of the smartphone-free childhood has really captured the public's attention. And children use screens and social media, and it's such a big topic at the moment. And I know that you have been increasingly asked about it in recent years, and it's something that a lot of parents worry about. Now, there's a lot of research out there, and I was talking to you before about Jonathan Haidt's book around smartphones and social media. So you're a great person to ask. Tell us about your opinion around the screen-free childhood.
Okay, so there's a difference between screen-free childhood and smartphone-free childhood. And smartphone-free childhood, I think, has a lot of merits. I think we don't let kids drive cars until they're 17. We don't let children do lots of things until they're old enough to handle it. And I think the technology has moved so fast and we don't know what kids are able to handle and what they're not. And I think there is a lot of merit in taking a slightly more cautionary approach and letting children have the freedoms that they get in childhood without access to some of the dangers that are inherent in smartphones. That said, screens can be great for kids. So kids can learn a lot from digital interactions, educational apps, good quality TV programs. So it's not about demonizing screens. It's about making sure that kids have the freedom to be kids and that digital play can be a part of their lives, but it's not in their pocket on a smartphone with unfettered access to the internet and social media until they're ready for it.
Yeah, as you say, I think it's being mindful. And what this podcast is all around really is getting parents and carers thinking about what they're doing with their screens. Tara talks a lot about the difference between what screen time actually is. There's a difference between looking up a recipe and scrolling for 3 hours, even as adults. So I think it's important what you've raised the difference between that, the good parts and the bad. And we're pro-tech, of course. So you do the Good Play Guide. That's about a balanced diet, isn't it, of play and screens. Tell us a bit more about the Good Play Guide.
Yeah, so goodplayguide.com is the website. And on there, you'll find lots of reviews of toys and games and apps and educational products, baby products, and it's all around helping families thrive through play. Because if you bring play into family life, everybody benefits. It's a real stress buster. It helps with bonding, it helps with communication, it helps kids develop a range of skills. And the idea is that in the same way that you balance what children eat, you want to balance what they do in their leisure time, and the social, active, imaginative, free, outdoor, child-led play, that's the superfoods. And if they're doing that, let them go. Let them have as much of that as they can, in the same way that if they're hungry and they want more broccoli, you let them go for it. The sweets and the treats of the play diet are the solitary, sedentary, passive things. And in the same way that previous generations would worry if there was a child who was a bookworm who just sat on the sofa and didn't want to play with their friends and didn't want to do anything else and was just reading books, it's the same thing. It's that solitary, sedentary and passive behaviour. Now, book reading, I would argue, isn't passive, but some of the screen activities can be. And everybody needs a bit of time to just chill out, and that's fine, but it should be treated in the same way that you treat sugar in your kids' diet. It's a limited amount. Only when they've eaten their vegetables do they get access to it, and it's limited. And I think we've not really got that sense of proportion. There's lots of different ways that children learn through play, whether it's a board game with granny or a den building with your friends in the woods, or building a tower of bricks, or make believe, dressing up, messy play, all of that kind of stuff. There's all different types of play, and they all develop different skills and help kids in different ways. So it's important to get that balance, but making sure that you've got more of the really good stuff and are managing how much of the sort of solitary, sedentary, passive time that kids are spending.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get balance. It's always about balance and thinking about what you could do alternatively rather than just automatically giving a child a screen or a smartphone. And of course, with the summer holidays and the weather's not always great. So it is a challenge for parents, but I think this is what this is about, trying to encourage parents to think about what they're doing with their digital literacy and stuff. Tell us about the good app guide that you recommend then, and what's your criteria for what makes a good app? Because lots of people say, oh no, but they're learning their alphabet or they're doing their numbers. But tell us what makes a good app and what isn't such a good one.
So when we do the reviews of digital products, it's all around how it engages children. We rate things on the fun, skills developed, and ease of use. So is it, can the kids use it? Because kids have a fairly low attention span. So if they can't use it intuitively, then that's a fail. What's it teaching them? So is it creativity, or is it numbers, or is it science? Is it about how the world works? And it can be stuff that is, you can still get quite a lot of social learning, things like Minecraft, where kids are playing together. There's still opportunities for communication. But then it's also about, is it fun? Because if we want kids to learn, we have to make it fun and engaging, because otherwise it'll just, be one of those apps that sits on the tablet and doesn't get played with, in the same way that a toy that's not fun gets sat in the cupboard and doesn't get played with. So whatever the benefits are, get missed if it's not fun. So that's how we rate the apps. And we try and make sure that they're age appropriate, that the kids are actually engaging with them positively. They're not addictive. They're as inclusive and as accessible as possible. Because I think one of the things that gets overlooked when we're looking at digital screen time is how beneficial it can be to children with additional needs, and children who don't learn in a social setting. If they don't react well to a classroom with lots of bustle and hustle and lots of other children, may struggle with the learning, not because they don't understand the concepts, but because it's not delivered in a way that suits their style of learning. So apps have a real role to play for children who have additional needs and who struggle in a school setting.
Oh, that is so interesting, and a great conversation to have with parents as well. Because I think what you've pointed out there is they can do it at their own speed or at their own rate. And you're right, it's a really great asset, isn't it, to them? You said about non-addictive. What do you mean? Because, of course, this is the problem with some of the games that kids get involved. We talked about gaming last week, actually, and boys and things like that. It's all geared up. Certainly social media is to get you addicted. What are you looking for that's, you said, non-addictive?
So you can build natural breaks into gaming so that there is the end of a level and it's not just a kind of continuous rolling game. You can make sure that the rewards aren't too... There's not always like, oh, just do one more for the next reward. Just do one more for the next reward. So it's the way rewards are embedded in the play. And I think if it's sociable, then you've got that. If you're playing with friends or with your family, then again, it's less of you're less at risk of it being addictive. But I know a lot of parents who come to me and they're like, I said the kids could have half an hour. I went and cooked the dinner, and 3 hours later they were still sat in exactly the same position, playing exactly the same game. And the kids don't notice that time passes.
Yes.
And that's what we need to. So, even something as simple as having a clock on the game can be really helpful, so that you can set a timer. You can at least be aware of how long you've been sat there. So those kind of things can be really powerful.
I remember doing that in the utility room with my daughter. Now, we're going back a bit before all of this really took off, but I had to have the clock. She had to sit in front of the clock. And I said, you've got from here to here. And she was always the one I had to go and say, just 5 more minutes left now. My son was much better at it. But just trying to manage it and having an ordinary clock even there is controlling it as, a bit. The younger the child, the harder it is. What's your view on all of this technology in toddlers? Because this episode is toddlers and tech. Talk about that.
The WHO, the World Health Organization, has some guidelines that state that children under 3 shouldn't really watch any screen-based entertainment. And I struggle with that, because I think there are a lot of very hardworking parents who love their kids and do very good jobs with their kids, who sometimes just need half an hour to plonk the kids in front of the TV, in front of good quality. I mean, the BBC stuff and CBeebies is brilliant, and there's some really good quality content out there. Everybody needs a bit of space. Everybody needs a bit of breathing time. And if you can use the TV, like you say, mindfully to do that, I don't think there's a problem with that. And I think there are certain TV shows that have been designed by speech therapists and language developers and all the rest of it to help children learn language interactively. And that's not, here, put them in front of the screen and they'll learn to talk. But as a complement to all the interaction that you do with your children, it's absolutely fine. So I don't like the kind of hard and fast rules of you should do this much time and no more. And I just think it makes parents feel guilty and unnecessarily so. That said, the idea that 5 and 6 year olds have got smartphones of their own now horrifies me.
I saw a child with a pink smartphone from a pram that was attached. So obviously it was a little girl in the pram and it could swing over and watch Peppa Pig or whatever she might be wanting to watch. That scares me, because you're not consciously thinking about what you're doing. And also there was an article I read in the Irish Independent this week about parents giving kids a smartphone before the tantrum, because then the child is not learning to self-regulate, is she or he?
Exactly. And I think that's where education really needs to come up. We need to do the research first, and we need to help parents and teachers and policymakers understand the pros and the cons. So yes, you avoid a tantrum, but what are you depriving them of? It's the same with not letting kids play outside. Yes, you're keeping them safe from every parent's worst nightmare of being abducted or whatever. And yes, you're keeping them safe from traffic. But actually, what are you depriving them of in the process? And that independence and risk management or developing all those really important social skills, that connection with their neighbourhood, the community spirit, all of that stuff that comes from getting kids outside playing is lost if you are too afraid of the bad stuff. So I think it's about mitigating danger when it's there, but not banning stuff outright.
Yeah, and allowing children, as you say, to explore, make mistakes, maybe fall over sometimes if they're climbing a bit too high. But from that, they learn. I call it failing forward sort of thing. So play is such an important part of that. In the early years, what are children learning when they're playing?
Oh, so play is how children learn. It's what they learn. So it's the tool that they use to make sense of their world. They're learning how the world works. So they learn that, you've got something with wheels, you can push it along. It's how they copy what's going on around them. So they might have a toy kitchen and they're practicing, they're copying dad, mum, granny, whoever in the kitchen. It's how they learn, and it's also how they learn about themselves. So it's what am I interested in? What makes me happy? What am I good at? All of those things come through play as well.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of types of play. I've got an infograph that shows you all the different types of play and different ages of what they're learning and what they're doing, and that kind of going along parallel play, and then that play when they snatch and they're learning from that, negotiation skills, leadership. It goes on and on.
It really does.
And that's why I'm so passionate about play, that people need to recognise and explore just allowing unstructured play as well. It's not all of that, let me guide it, let me interrupt, let me do it. It is actually just letting them play and letting them grow and letting them be. So there's so much in there. I know you've written for Genius of Play. There's about 50 experts on there. Through their website, there's all sorts of things that you can find out. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. We're also going to put your websites, of course, into the show notes. Do you want to tell me what they are so people listening can remember?
Of course. So goodplayguide.com is the main website for reviews and advice and articles on playful family life, as well as quite a lot of stuff on additional needs and talking to kids about different issues and that kind of stuff. Fundamentallychildren.com is our research consultancy. So anybody who's interested in learning more about the kind of the business side of what we do and the research and how we approach that, is fundamentallychildren.com. And the other role I have for the last year or so now is the API, so chair of the Association of Play Industries, which is around outdoor play and playgrounds. So if you look on the API website, you can find out more about the benefits of letting kids go down to the local playground and what they can learn and how that all works. So yeah, they're the websites.
Love all of that. So what's your big takeaways? People listening to this, toddlers and tech and play and children slightly older and play right the way through our lives, because I think if you're more playful, you enjoy life a little more. You know, we need to lighten up a bit. What would you say would be your top takeaways from listening to this today?
Let children play, absolutely prioritise play, and you don't have to be your kid's entertainer 24/7. Kids benefit from being able to play on their own. Yeah, absolutely.
The Butlins red coat.
Yeah, kids get a lot of benefit out of playing with other children and even playing on their own at times. So there's that. Yeah. I think making sure you've got that balanced play diet, I think, is really important. And again, there's the model of that and all the more information on goodplayguide.com. And then I think the other thing is to try and get play as part of everyday life. So it's not a chore that you go, okay, yes, it's 5:00 on a Friday afternoon, it's playtime, we're going to go and play a game together. It's about bringing playfulness into everyday life. So whether it's laying out your kids' clothes in the morning and they have to go and find them and put them on in the right order, or whether it's kids helping with the laundry and matching socks up, or those kind of things, bringing playfulness into everyday life can really help. It helps with bonding, it helps with kids learning, it helps de-stress things, and it saves it being another thing that parents have on their to-do list of something that they, have to carve out time for.
Yeah, absolutely. So play is the way. That's
absolutely,
what I say.
I like that.
Play is the way forward.
I'd like to ask you something based on what you were saying about research, because I think that was so important when you said about research. And it's all relatively new, the impacts of tech, all these tech. And I've read a lot of conflicting research, and I've also heard a lot of people saying that obviously tech companies have their own research companies that will support, that tech isn't so bad. Well, what are your thoughts about research? Because my opinion is parents really need to feel their own children and understand the impacts that these techs and screeners are having on them and play. You don't necessarily need someone to tell you whether it's safe or not. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. The integrity of the research is key. So make sure you know who's funding it. Follow the money always. Independent research is really valuable. And I think listening to people like Jonathan Hayden, and there's a lot of increasing areas of research in this space, but we are still very much in the early days, and research is a bit of a tanker. It takes a while. Good research is rigorous and it needs checking and validating and peer reviewing and all of that kind of stuff. So it does take a while to come through, and we are still, and one of my issues is because young children aren't allowed to be on social media until they're 13, you can't research them because you can't find them because they've all put fake IDs and fake ages in. So it's very, very difficult to understand the proper impact of smartphones and social media on children under 13, because ethics around the research are it's such a minefield. So I think we need to be prioritizing getting the research and taking an evidence-based approach, because like I said at the beginning, it's not about banning screens. It's not about not having any digital engagement for young children, even toddlers. There's things they can do on apps and tablets that they can be fun, they can be entertaining, they can be educational. So it's not about banning it, but we need that evidence base to be able to make informed decisions, and we need to be really alert to the source of the research, in the same way that we should have been a lot more alert to the research done by sugar companies in the 60s and 70s. We need to follow the money.
Yeah, I think that's so important for parents to be aware of, because often it's presented as this is the answer. This is, but we don't have the answer. And I just to really say it again, what you said, and parents need to watch their children and know their children. Unfortunately, there's no way around it because we don't have the evidence-based research yet, right?
No, absolutely. And that's one of my things. And that's why some of the stuff that Sue does and we try and do is, it's not about telling parents what to do. It's about empowering them to make informed choices that work for their family, because they know their family best. And if the more people that just say, this is essentially, here's the manual, this is what you're supposed to do as a parent, the more you don't trust your own instincts. And that's really dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. And it's empowering parents and just getting them thinking, if nothing else, because we do, as a parent, you know your child better than anyone else. So really great points. Thank you. So thank you for joining us today. I know you're off on a nice trip to Prague. I think you said you were off to, but thanks so much for all that you do. And I've known you so many years, and I think it's so robust, all the research that you do. So go and check out all the things that Amanda does and offers to parents as well. So thanks very much,
Thanks,
Amanda.
Sue. Oh, no, thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Pleasure.
Listener questions.
Right, listeners' questions, Angeline. Off you go. Tell us about that.
Well, we've received some fantastic questions from our listeners. It's always great to hear what you think, what you want to know. So let's dive in and provide some answers. The first one, how can I prevent my toddler from becoming too dependent on screens? Well, I think many parents are worried about this. Here in Italy, we were 1 month into the summer holiday already. So you meet parents and often that's what we're talking about. Like, how are they managing or not managing? And it's very often about alternatives. So the best thing that you can do is just constantly look for them. Because if you think about screen time as a lack of an alternative, which really often is, because toddlers, children, they really usually prefer doing something else. But if they can't think of it, or they think that's the solution to boredom, that's where they're going to go and become dependent on it. Especially boredom needs to not be like nobody likes to be bored, but they need to, as you said, get over the boredom by themselves. So encourage a variety of activities. It's really crucial. Think of them together. Sometimes they'll have some trouble on their own. Build up over time. You can have a list. I've said that a few times. And make sure your has plenty of opportunities for physical play, creative activities, social interactions. I know it's depending on where you live, it can be easier or harder. Obviously, in the cities, it's not always easy to find a nice place to let your child out run and be free. But there are possibilities. You can look for them. And as you said before, tech-free times and zones also make a big difference. Toddlers, young children, they thrive on regularities. If they know at a certain time in a certain place, there's no phone, then that's just the way the world is. So if you would set this in, meal times, bedrooms, as we say quite often, and engage as much as you can, really engage, get them interested in activities. And over time, I had a child that did not want to spend very much time by herself. It was extremely exhausting compared to other children. So over time, they learn it, if you put a lot of energy into it at the beginning. So just that kind of thing. Setting a good example.
Yeah, I wrote about it's for a minute. And it's a blog on my website if you want to look up or Google Sue Atkins for a minute. Because if you sit down with a young child, any child actually, sometimes they don't know how to start. So you sit on the floor or wherever you are, and in your head, you're here for a minute. And you get them started and you get them playing or whatever they're doing. And actually, you're probably there for a few more minutes than that. They love it because you're engaged. But then you step out and say, I've got to go and peel the potatoes, or whatever you've got to go and do. And that then means they're off on the play. You've started them off. So for a minute is a really nice little tip for young children too. We had another question in. How do I handle tantrums when it's time to turn off the screens? Now, of course, that's quite common, isn't it, as well? Tara, what's your advice? I mean, you've got a 3-year-old. What do you do? I mean, it's a tough situation. Many parents face it. dealing with the tantrum perhaps when it's time to turn off the screen? What strategies can help?
Well, it's definitely a tough situation. Lots of parents face this, sort of dealing with tantrums. We mentioned earlier there about the timing of screens, and particularly I think later on our children are going to be tired. Of course it's going to be harder to negotiate, so you're arguably setting yourself up for a battle the later you leave it. And we're tired as parents later as well. It's been a long day and you're thinking, right, we need to get this wrapped up. But it's clear, consistent boundaries and expectations. With my 3-year-old, the times if we have been out and about or if it's been on the tablet and not the TV, I make him part of it. So I don't press the button. Warning, let him know that his screen time's coming to an end. And that, can you remember how to press pause? Oh, it's tricky that, where's the pause button? A sense of ownership for him. So he knows it will still be on him to draw it to an end. And he does not have this particularly often because we try to keep our cartoons I've talked about Bluey several times. It's great, but that comes to a natural end. We can press the big button and the TV's off. So whilst it's not toddlers, I am going to give this tip because it has been so helpful with my older children. 4 boys in this house. Some tech is live, particularly in a gaming environment, and this is classic or ripe for tantrums. So my 11-year-old, he will be gaming with his friends. He needs a very clear warning if it's going to be mealtime. 15 minutes, I'll let him know. And then he may have gone into a live game. Imagine for a minute, so we're in the middle of this podcast, or you're doing an email, or you're doing work, and you're right in the throes of it, and your partner or somebody comes in and says, dinner's ready, and slams your screen shut. You'd be so frustrated because you're in the middle of something live. Of course, that's going to lead to friction. And this happens a lot with the parent-child balance. Like I've said, off screens. It's very different. They could be in a last game down to the final 2. And if you pull the plug at that moment, it's going to cause a tantrum. It will. If, however, again, you've got those clear boundaries, so my son will know he goes into the game. Sometimes the game's over and he'll appear at my side in the kitchen 5, 6, 7 minutes early, finishing getting dinner ready. Great. Every now and then he'll be a little bit late. Yes, that can feel frustrating. In the grand scheme of things, it's a few minutes. He knows the boundary. He was allowed to finish his game. He'll come and have his meal. And we have a calmer mealtime. So it's about making sure you understand the tech that they're using. You put in the appropriate end of tech time. The boundaries are safe and you will avoid the tantrums. Being inconsistent is going to lead to tantrums. If a child's going to say, just one more, and you might still be dishing up and you think one more's fine. But if you've let them have one more that night, what's going to happen the next night? Of course they're going to want one more or one more. And if you change the boundaries and you're inconsistent, that's when we see tantrums happen.
I always suggest consistency and clear communication are the key for this one. Set clear rules, I think, around screen time and stick to them. That's the important thing. You've said it. Routine, systems, consistency, boundaries, and sort of consequences. And sometimes with little ones, they have no concept of time. So you give them a bit of a warning. It's a bit like if you're playing with friends, you go, oh, we're going to be going in 5 minutes, even though they don't understand 5 minutes. But you're giving them the heads up that you're going to be changing the activity, or you're going to be leaving, or you're going to be doing something else. And that helps them. And I always think distraction, is a great thing. Oh, look, come over here. There's a butterfly. Let's look at that. All that sort of distraction helps as well. And of course, don't forget to praise your children when they do turn off the screen without a fuss. Because I'm a great believer in positive parenting. Reward the behaviour you want to see more of, and you'll get more of it. So don't forget to praise them when they play nicely with another child, or they come off the screen when you've said it without a big old tantrum. I mean, as you say, Angeline, it all takes time. There's no quick fix. But with consistent practice, toddlers can learn to handle screen time limits much better. So I hope that gives you food for thought.
Now for some top tips.
So So now it's time for our weekly quick tips section if you hadn't had enough tips from us already. But this is usually where we try and share some bite-sized nuggets of wisdom to help you navigate the digital jungle more effectively. So Tara, what's your quick wins for this week?
What can you do to ensure your end of screen time boundaries are effective, clear, and non-negotiable? Don't move on them, set them and stick to them. Even if one or two of them for older children has a little bit of flexibility built in, but particularly for toddlers, man, our toddlers are smart. You bend the rules, they're going to remember the next day. Stick to clear boundaries.
Angeline, what are your quick wins for this week?
Do your best and be aware. That's the tip. Be aware of what is leading you, for example, to give them the screen. What can you change in yourself? What can you make at this situation? So be aware of everything. Do your best and it will be fine. That's my quick tip.
Love it. So actually, Angeline, what are you working on this week and recently?
Well, it's a summer break, so I'm enjoying not working as much because my daughter is off, but I am preparing for the next school year to come. So I'm really looking forward to getting into more schools around and working on the activities with a lot of collaborators in the US and the UK, mainly in Africa. I'm really looking forward to that. So that's what I'm doing right now.
And I know that Data Girl may be getting a new voice. Am I right?
Yes, we are reviewing all the voices and new characters are coming out too. Like I'm going to review. Quick tip. I learned this from feedback. Just because I like a voice doesn't mean that the young children are going to like the voice. So I'm no longer going according to what I like, but according to what my daughter likes.
Well, yeah. And also, listeners, go and watch Data Girl, think about the voices and send us in some feedback because it's true. I was listening to some of the old ones with Data Girl's voice, then the new one that you were, exploring with. Because kids can give you the feedback because they're the ones that the videos are for. So if any listeners here, please go and check out Data Girl and Friends. And what's the website again?
It's datagirlandfriends.com and there's just a slash between all the words.
That's easy to remember, isn't it? So there we go. And Tara, what are you working on at the moment?
I am having a lovely time at the moment because I'm back in schools and working with lots of young people. And we've been particularly focused on Year 6 students as they're getting ready for the transition to secondary school, thinking about phone use, thinking about technology. Lots of the topics we've discussed today, impact on sleep, phones out of bedroom, restrictions, boundaries, that's all been in there. But linked back to today as well, I really want to focus on the priority of play for our young people. I mean, of course, we all want to see our children playing more. And that does take having a look at the structure of their days, their weeks, their weekends, and considering how we plan for it. But we've got to look back to the children as well. And there was a fantastic picture that used to hang in the staff room at my school. And it was a kid and it said, yeah, school's great. Apart from those bits in between break time and lunchtime, which of course is the school day. But kids know best, out of the mouths of babes. Kids want to play. And Simply Politics have just done a poll and it was great. They asked Key Stage 1, so our younger children in school, and they gave them a vote and they said they could choose, and it was a non-uniform day, 20 minutes extra break, treat snack instead of a healthy snack, juice and squash instead of water. So we're really kind of testing them with bending the rules. Absolutely not. The winner, they all voted, and the winner was the extra break. Listen to the kids. Our kids want to play more.
Navigating the Digital Jungle with Sue Atkins and Friends.
That's a wrap, as they say. Quite a lot there. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for tuning in to Navigating the Digital Jungle with Sue Atkins and Friends. I really hope you found the discussions insightful and empowering and thought-provoking. As we all navigate the digital jungle together, as we say, there are no definitive answers for all of it, but hopefully if we start getting you thinking, and if you've enjoyed the regular episodes so far, we'd love you to actually tell your schools about it. Tell your neighbours, tell your friends, tell your family to tune in, because actually schools could put this into their newsletter as a useful free resource that actually could help a lot of parents. So please help us spread the word, because it's full of tips, as you know, full of advice, full of ideas to help you with your digital parenting. So subscribe to it, listen to next week's episode as well. And until next time, stay safe, have fun, keep exploring, and try the summer screen-free change.
Yeah, Jim got out there.